Today's session will explore the intersection of AI, human identity, and global disruption, and ask a very important question. Can technology help bridge divides in an increasingly polarised and uncertain world? But before I introduce the speakers, I'm going to spend 7-8 minutes taking you through a broad understanding of humanity. Humanity started to move out of Africa about 100,000 years ago. And we had this extraordinary ability to be able to colonise every aspect of the globe. And there's been no other creature on Earth that's been able to do that, except for these tiny little water bears called tardigrades. But the reason why humanity has been able to spread across the globe is because we're highly adaptive and responsive to changes. We create cultures, we exist within cultures. And no other creature can do that like human beings. From 100,000 BC to 10,000 BC, humanity's population remained pretty static, 1 million. So you might ask why? Well, we had an ice age, and that ice age was critical in the development of the modern human. It gave us time to think deeply, the ability to think deeply and critically. From 10,000 BC until 1827, our population exploded from 1 million to 1 billion. 1904, we became 2 billion. 1960, 3 billion. 1972 or 1974, I think it was, 4 billion. And by 1989, we truly became 5 billion. And you might say, why 1989? I'm going to pause in 1989. 1989 was a significant year, as Jean-Christophe would know. The Berlin Wall collapsed, and we were told we were going to be holding hands, singing Kumbaya, and that's going to be the end of division. That's what Fukuyama told us, the geopolitical theorist. But nothing could have been further from the truth. But that particular year, there were a couple of other things that happened. Social theorist Kimberly Crenshaw gave us intersectionality theory, which I found somewhat problematic, and I can talk about that another day. But that same year, Tim Berners-Lee gave us the World Wide Web. Fantastic. And everyone thought, wow, this is great. All of a sudden, we're living in this super compressed age, this super diverse age where time and space have been compressed, and we can all communicate with each other. And we experience massive economic globalisation without globalisation of values and ethics. So the ability to understand and relate to the other has become more important than ever. So what happened during this time? We had this explosion of technology, and you would think with all the technology in the world would be becoming a better place. So what did we find? I'm going to go through some of these macro trends. Peace has been steadily on the decline since 2008. 2008 is also another significant year because social media started to take hold. 2011, we had the Arab Spring, and in many ways, social media gave rise to the Arab Spring. And according to the Global Peace Index, peace has been declining year after year, except for a couple of little bumps there. Okay, so what do we see here? The rise of social media and external conflicts. Is there a correlation between social media and external conflicts? Well, we had this relative period of quite a bit of stability and peace, and me thinks, yes, there is. Social media, to a large extent, has encased us into these silos and pitted us against each other. Okay, so these are some numbers. According to UNESCO, 75% of all the conflict that we have in the world has a cultural dimension. And that equates to something like $14.3 trillion every year that's spent on dealing with conflict. So why aren't we understanding this concept of culture better in its entirety and how it intersects with absolutely everything, and especially with technology? These are some other statistics. In my country, social exclusion costs the Australian economy $45 billion every year. Disability inequity, 6.65. Racialised inequity, 6 trillion. Gender inequity, 12 trillion. And 89% of all conflicts that are happening in the world are happening in areas where there's low levels of intercultural dialogue. So what role can technology play in all of this today? And today, I want to be introducing you to amazing panelists or speakers who are thought leaders in their own respective fields. From coding prodigy at age 3 to college at 12 and beginning her doctorate at 18, our first panelist is now reshaping the tech world with same-page AI. She's a digital nomad. She travels all over the world. We were in Dubai 2 days ago. 5 weeks before that, we were in New York City. She's created the same-page AI, a platform uniting voices and building real-time consensus. She's also using big data to transform geospatial investment, proving that AI can drive a more sustainable and connected future. She's the former vice president of BlackRock, where she worked closely with Larry Fink. Please put your hands together for Gold Darr. Thank you. Gold, take the second seat over here. Our next speaker is a dear friend of mine. We've been friends for almost 15 years now and has influenced me in many ways. He's held many director positions at intergovernmental organisations such as the World Bank, the United Nations, Alliance of Civilizations, the Council of Europe, and has forged initiatives with some of the world's biggest corporations to enhance intercultural understanding. He's also the author of Europe à la carte, a reflection on European identity, and is the founder and CEO of the Global Compass, an interactive and solution-oriented platform for building inclusive, participative, and pluralistic societies. Jean-Christophe, thank you. Our next speaker comes from across the channel. He's a world authority on multidisciplinary thinking and the author of the acclaimed book, The Polymath. He founded the DaVinci Network, a global community of thinkers and practitioners bridging disciplines. He's also a former diplomat and accomplished artist. His work caught the attention of Sir Nasser Khalili, who invited him to serve as the executive director of the Khalili Foundation, which is committed to building and advancing intercultural and interfaith understanding across the world. Waqas Ahmed, a true polymath. And from Denmark, whose heritage is actually, I believe, from Palau, which is a tiny island in Micronesia just above Australia. We have this individual who's been dedicating her life to educating and empowering the public on data sovereignty, data rights, and the responsible use of AI through policy, frameworks, research, and global initiatives. She's an AI literacy consultant, founder of AI for Good in Denmark, and the ambassador for My Data Global. Olivia, Heslinga, thank you. I think the question that's on everyone's mind over here, and I'd like each of the panelists to spend maybe 3 minutes talking to each of this. In a time of accelerating technological change, climate change and shifting geopolitics, can scalable, high-performance AI innovation strengthen rather than further fracture our societies? Maybe we might start with Gold. You're closest to me. Thank you.
Sure. So I think it's a double-sided sword here. It absolutely has the power to be functionally useful for everything we need. We're entering an era of mass customization, right? I just gave a lecture on this at a different AI conference where we had a previous industrial revolution that allowed us to use equipment to make a lot of the same thing. And now we have the opportunity to use AI and really intensive customized data to make mass customization, something that's very specific. And to preserve diversity and to deal with the environmental change, this is a good tool. But most of the use cases right now are for consolidation because the existing financial structures and organizations that own them are interested in how to use them to lock down their market sectors. And what I have observed for a long time is that they're not interested in switching cost. They actually want to minimize that at the expense of innovation and at the expense of diversification. That's why you end up with a lot of cities where buildings look the same. So the technology absolutely does allow us to solve this problem, but the business models do not, and we need to not assume that the technology, by its innate virtue of its ability to do it, will solve the problem unless we give it the business vehicle that allows it to.
What would those business models look like?
Those could definitely look, we were at a tech conference, tokenized ownership, things that have more diversified representation on board structures. You know, there's absolutely no reason that you can't have these kinds of voices. What I would say is that this comes down to, at a consumer level, your support ultimately decides whether businesses die or succeed, right? And at a governance level, do not settle anymore. You have an expectation, I mentioned this actually in London, that every year your cell phone gets better, right? That you can go buy a better tech device. Have that expectation for everything in your life. AI allows it to make something that's better for you. Do not let a company tell you this is the best they've got. Push them back, that it has to be suited to you. It has to be customized. It has to be relevant to who you are, your background, your gender. Don't let someone else's solution be good enough for you. Demand your own, both as a customer and as an owner, and it can be given to you.
I like that idea. Demand better. Jean-Christophe, over to you, thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your invitation, Peter. I find interesting, actually, that this conversation is taking place in this sort of a big brouhaha. And I think it illustrates perfectly what we are actually discussing. And in a brouhaha, it's extremely difficult to figure out what's going on, what are the major issues. There's lots of confusion. And so that's why I would like to stress this atmosphere in this conference room today to make clear or make a point about the extreme confusion, at least where I am standing. Maybe you have a much clearer perspective, but I think there are a multiple set of parameters that we are confronted. This is not just about tech. This is not just about geopolitics. This is not just about regulation. This is not just about specific points. It is actually first and foremost about civilizations in a way. And what we as human want to see, or where we as human want to see the world heading. And in a way, the world is at a crossroads. We are in a way witnessing a profound multiple shift in different directions, with one major element is that since January 20, and this is not a political statement, not at all, but there has been a radical change in the world where we are. We as Europeans, we as Westerners, we as people from the South and from the East, it's the end of January 20 has been a radical shift in the sense that it has been the end of trust that in a way put us together in the last 70 years. And the global architecture of the world that was based on trust, rule of law, equilibrium, has been in a way shifted away. And we have now to, and again, this is no political statement. I mean, of course, as a former UN or World Bank staff, you know, I'm very much attached to multilateral agreement, multilateral cooperation, international cooperation. I understand that the world is changing and that we are, or that at least a majority or the strongest people on earth don't want that anymore. But we have to take this into account in the way we are, in a way, designing, shaping, and we as citizens seeing the the issues that is bringing us together about tech and inclusive society, or tech of, even without not going that far, that inclusive is just cohesive society, cohesive and stable society.
JC, I'm hearing a few things there. We know that we've seen the emergence of the civilization state in the last few years, and before that, Samuel Huntington wrote his book, The Clash of Civilizations. In many ways, this has been contested now by something much greater, isn't it? And we're going to hear about this a lot later. Did you want to speak to that at all?
Well, it's good that you remind us this notion of civilization state, and because many people are saying that we are now witnessing the rise of new empires, and that the major power forces around the world are developing their own sphere of influence. But it goes beyond that, or at least what we see, and again, I mean, most people in this room are from Europe or from the Western world. What we see now, and I think is a major, major concern, is this attempt now by the tech giant, and not just the tech giant, but also supported by the state. So this is a public and a private attempt to, in a way, eradicate what makes the European approach or European culture specifics. And I think, I think we will be discussing further about sovereignty and the loss of sovereignty. But this is a real issue. When we see now that there is an attempt or a willingness by the tech giant to refuse Europe, for instance, to set up its own regulation against hate speech, against radicalization, against support for terrorism, etc., etc. And we see now this sort of a new balance of power with the threat or even the by the tech giant to say, if you keep on having those regulation, we will eventually cut off our services. Or even without being so radical, as we have thousands of wires under the sea, and it would be very easy just to slow down the flows of data and information. And if it takes tomorrow 30 minutes for you to download a set of pictures, then you will be upset, then you will be angry.
Absolutely.
And sorry, I don't want to be too long, but this is what we already witness now. Is this, when you see what has happened just a few months ago in Brazil with the decision by the Supreme Court to block X, so the Elon Musk network, because it was in a way supporting or let people supporting disinformation, Bolsonaro judgment, etc., etc. So during a couple of weeks, the judge, the Supreme Court, has decided to block the network. And this has created lots of, in a way, frustration with people supporting or people radically opposing this decision. And so I think it's really urgent now to eventually to sit down all together and say, what is it that we want to do? How to avoid this sort of extreme situation? And we are here in France. I mean, just now a year and a half ago, remember that Mr. Pavel Durov was the founder of Telegram. When he arrived on the French territory, he was arrested at the airport because he was refusing to have some sort of minimal regulation on a whole range of fundamental issues that are considered unacceptable from our own perspective. And so, there is a risk to see more and more of those clash. And I think this would be bad for everyone. So it is in the interest of everyone in a way, to sit down and to see how we can invent a new set of regulation, because, of course, there is this whole debate of regulation versus innovation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jean-Christophe. And what I'm hearing here is global consensus is going to be integral to really building a better world. And at the moment, I can't see that happening. With our organisation, we have servers all over the world, and we need to have servers all over the world because there are different regulations in different parts of the country. I just want to paraphrase the question again. We're living in this age of a lot of flux. How do Waqas, how do you see AI innovation strengthening rather than continuing this ongoing fracturalization and polarization of our societies?
Thank you. I'm most concerned about the fact that AI is increasingly shaping our understanding of reality. So just imagine whenever you have a query about something, you are increasingly, and in a year, 2 years, 5 years' time, you will increasingly rely on your AI system or your AI assistant to give you a response to something. And that response will influence your understanding of reality. Now, the reason why I'm concerned about that is because AI systems largely, especially large language models, are trained on internet data. And we know that internet is flooded with misinformation, number one, but it's also hugely disproportionate in terms of the cultures that it represents and the perspectives that it represents. And that will reflect in the responses it gives you. So let's say, for example, your children or grandchildren, a few years into the future, ask their version of Alexa or Siri, what is art? What is art? Okay? The response will be what is reflected in the internet of the time. And as we know, most AI systems, they scrape big data sources like Wikipedia and or Wikimedia content, right? And we know how biased, culturally biased, Wikipedia is. So we know that, for example, it is 87%, we did research on this last year, 87% of it is culturally biased towards a Eurocentric understanding of what art is, simply because most of the art that's been digitized and shared on open access has been Western art. Now, this is for cultural reasons as well as political reasons, but just imagine the treasure troves of artistic heritage that exist in the non-Western world, which is the majority. Just imagine that is not considered in the understanding of art. Art is one example. We could talk about philosophy, we could talk about geopolitics, we can talk about history, but basically the net result is that the AI systems will give us a falsified, at best, and definitely a very fragmented understanding of what reality is. And that reality will shape our decisions and our behaviors. So at that civilizational level, imagine our understanding of reality, our attitude towards other people, other cultures, other perspectives. This will exacerbate over time. And that is my main concern. And therefore, in terms of how we address this, of course, it's a difficult conundrum because ideally we want cultural perspectives from the non-Western world to be available on open access online so it's accessible to AI systems, but that itself has its challenges, its budgetary challenges, its geopolitical challenges, and so on. So I think that is something that we need to firstly acknowledge to be a major problem before we can actually go ahead and address it.
Thanks. And what I'm hearing there is that the AI is only as good as the data that it's looking at. And to a large extent, it's amplifying bias. It erases identities and it makes many assumptions. Why does it make assumptions? Because of the algorithms that it's looking at are still under the assumption that we're all coming from the same place socially or culturally, and Waqas spoke to that. I'm just going to read some facts out to you here. Less than 2%, approximately 95 languages of the world's languages are supported by major AI platforms. That means about 2.5 billion people can't access language learning models in their own language. Visual AI amplifies racial stereotypes to millions of users on a daily basis. AI image generators produce 90% light-skinned faces for professional roles. These are facts that I'm giving out to you now. So the faces aren't reflecting the global diversity of our population. And if you typed in terrorism, more than likely, about 99% of all the faces that you're going to be seeing aren't going to be light-skinned individuals. So this is the bias that already exists within AI. I want to play a little video before I go over to Olivia. And this little video goes on for about a minute. And it, if you're looking at planet Earth from a distance, you'd say, what a beautiful place it is, okay? But as you start to look closer at planet Earth, you begin to notice, wow, this is a world that's made up of 193, nations, full member states, 2 non-member states, all the dependent territories. But in reality, there's more than 8,500 ancestries, just as many cultures, over 10,000 languages, speech communities, speech variations, and there's about 9,000, religions and their sub-branches. Where are they when it comes to AI? And when you start to intersect every single human and their cultural identity against other demographic dimensions of diversity, we are all as unique as a fingerprint. And that's the reality of the world that we're living in today. So I want to go to, I want to hear from Olivia and what she's got to say about innovation and how we can disrupt the challenges it's presenting us with.
Not a very easy question, but I think it's a combination of what all the panelists have mentioned. I'm very much for data sovereignty and personal ownership of your AI and your data, because as we've seen with big tech and how Americans run capitalist monopolies, they will extract until they can't. And so if we do not stop them, whether that's through technology, whether that's through social movement, values movement, democratic movements, regulation, and enforcements, because I think EU is very good at philosophizing and intellectualizing what needs to be done, but there's no enforcement. We've seen this in the Digital Act, we've seen this in GDPR, and now we're seeing it in the AI EU Act, and heavy lobbying in your parliaments. So if you want to make an EU solidarity movement for democratic values and AI alignment in your context, in your culture, which is not in the American large language models, purge what is in the poison that's in your parliament. It will lead to a fascist government. It will lead to a cultural convergence, primarily American, and it will lead to manipulation and psych ops in your population.
Wow, there's a lot that you've said there. I'm going to move the conversation forward. This morning I had a vampire awakening because of my circadian rhythm. It's all over the place. I flew in from Australia. And I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning and I thought, let me start preparing for today's talk. And one of the things I typed in was, I wanted to know what were the 10 largest companies by market capitalization. And 9 out of the 10 of those companies are tech companies, bar Aramco. And I know Aramco are moving into this space in a really big way. They're investing billions of dollars into OpenAI and many other platforms out there. But I'm going to read these companies out to you. It's NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, Broadcom just made an appearance out of nowhere. I mean, their share price went up, 1,000%. So they're worth something like $1.3 trillion in the space of just a few months. Meta, formerly known as Facebook, TSMC, which produces all the superconductors, and Tesla. The combined market capitalization of these companies is $25 trillion. And it's anticipated that it's going to be over $50 trillion. And there's going to be new players entering this market. So start to think of that, what that actually means. The market capitalization of some of these companies is way more than the GDP of most economies out there. JC, I want to turn to you because you partly answered this question. And you're a geopolitical theorist. I've known your work for a long time. Are we seeing a new kind of colonialism, through big data and what we could call, technological control?
Well, it's interesting to see that this word of tech colonialism has been coined not long ago, and that's in a way it resonates because it creates lots of anxiety, and again also because it's a great illustration of what might indeed happen. And I think that it's important to remind us of what is colonialism. I mean, colonialism is first and foremost collecting or extracting goods or product from a territory, and to keep a strong hand on this territory and influence its policy. So in a way, this is what we actually might be witnessing in the years to come. If there is no strong reaction, not just from one country or from one organization, I think it is very important to create a sort of a world movement of those who want to keep human at the center of technology and AI, and those who want to find this good balance between technology and its legitimate willingness to expand, but in a way to put it in the right direction for the good of human and for the good of people. And this is probably not where it's currently heading. But there are a few factors of hope. And I'd like just to give one example or two examples. One has been the recent summit that took place in Paris last February, this AI summit, which was the third edition, with the previous edition in the UK, the second in Korea, the third in Paris. And so this was co-organized by the French presidency and the Prime Minister of India. I don't mean that the results were absolutely breathtaking, but still there is a process going on, and it's interesting to see that, you know, the US was represented at a very high level because the vice president, the freshly elected vice president, showed up and so demonstrated his willingness to be part of this global conversation. And another interesting example, which very few people know, but that could actually have a very strong impact in the long run, is what is called the Minerva Dialogues. Does anybody know about the Minerva Dialogues? No, nobody. And it's interesting, the Minerva Dialogues are taking place every year for the last 10 years, organized by what is probably one of the largest global organizations in the world, by the Vatican. The Vatican, which already spoke very loudly about climate change. The Vatican and the Pope, the previous Pope, took this initiative to launch what is called the Minerva Dialogues that brings the key actors, the tech giants, government, NGOs, civil society, every year in Rome at the Vatican to discuss the regulation, the spirit of AI regulation. And it's interesting to see that this Minerva Dialogues is getting lots of traction. Keep in mind that we have a Pope now that is American, and that this is not a pure coincidence that, in a way, his candidacy, or that there was such a strong support to have him as a Pope, you know, because he has, in a way, not just a direct line, but a very strong influence in the US. And I don't want to anticipate anything, but it's a good factor of hope to say that we are not just a few isolated individuals who are willing in a very candid way or naive way to say AI should be oriented or led to promote human being, but there are very strong forces in a way behind the scene that are also pushing into this direction.
Thanks, JC. JC, you've been involved in the area of intercultural dialogue now for decades. You even headed up the Dialogue of Civilizations. And, there's been a big push out there in the world to really foster intercultural dialogue as a core competency of what it means to be a global citizen today. I want to ask the panelists, maybe starting with Gold, how do we start to inform the design process? And how do we start to get everyone in this room, because over there's a sign called "We Build Connections." Okay, I'm thinking, what sort of connections are they talking about? Wired connections? Are they talking about human connections? Because to foster human connections requires a competency. To all the speakers, what is that going to look like in the design process?
Yeah, that's a great question. We were actually talking about it a little bit in the speaker's lounge before this. So ironically, it actually kind of comes back to the question on colonialism as a vector. I don't know how many people in this room know, why was colonialism so effective? Like, why did that become the thing that was successful? It's all about fracturing. It's about the fact that you turn every colony into something that cannot survive without the empire. That's how it works. Each colony produces one item, so it literally doesn't have the food or basic resources to sustain itself, and it requires the mercy and provenance of the empire to give it what it needs. That robs it of its innate connection and of its innate wholeness. This is now something that is being done at the individual level. You are being robbed of your data and information and being told now you cannot exist without someone telling you that you deserve employment, that you deserve connection, that you deserve healthcare. And as long as you believe that, the ability of this process to continue robbing you of connection and to use this design process to consolidate something away from your retirement, away from your stability, will continue. And so, what has to happen in the design process is we have to pull that back to say, what happens to make you more sovereign, more self-sufficient? How would you get into a position where you are sure that you have food for the rest of your life and for your kids and that you have health care? AI really should give you the answers to those things. And one of the things that was mentioned earlier is this concept of trust, that we're going into an era where it's impossible to trust anything from the data that you're reading online because of the skewed perspectives. That's part of this fractionalization. But how is trust built? Because I strongly argue trust is not built on perfection. It is built by repair. And the way that we currently build models is to try and avoid responsibility. It's to say that risk does not exist because we didn't make a mistake, and if we did, you don't find out about it. And this is a problem with AI, because if truth is at the center of a maze and you're navigating a maze, the thing about AI is it can build the maze faster than you can run. You will never reach the center of that truth in the design process. So it has to become a part of the design process, of the technology itself and of the business models, that risk is no longer about the problem of being discovered. The problem actually needs to be the real problem. It needs to be when you've broken trust with me, when I used a model and it created harm in my life or the life of someone else, that there is a real expectation that as soon as that becomes known, the goal is to fix the problem. And I mean in full, whether that's in court or whether that's in private sector. That, as a part of regulation and policy, is non-negotiable for a good future. Because if that's true, the AI doesn't spend its time trying to hide the truth from you in the maze. It spends its time trying to expedite you finding the truth so that you can work together to achieve something that you want. It places the impetus on value, and it places the goal of the design to be actually figuring out how to minimize harm. And you need the AI to be a collaborator and not an antagonist in that process from a design perspective. That is the only way to preserve truth and perspective. It is the only way to build trust, and it is the only way to approach enterprise or civilization level risk.
Thanks. Waqas, I want to hear from you from a multidisciplinary perspective. What does that mean for you and the work that you've been doing? Converging different disciplines together. We know that innovation is based on knowledge, and knowledge is based on the diversification of ideas. So, what does this all mean for you?
Yeah, I think the current system has been built, or has been built and designed, or has emerged out of a particular cultural paradigm, which is hyper-specialization, compartmentalization of knowledge. So we can all speak to this, I'm sure, right? So you go to school, you specialize as you go into university, you specialize even further as you go into your workplace, and then you're compelled to specialize even further as you go further on. What that does is it creates cultural, professional, and knowledge silos. And so imagine a technology such as AI emerging from that. What would it look like? Okay, so my contention is that we need a human in the loop process, not just a human in the loop process, but a human centric process to the whole design, whereby instead of what is happening currently, we are cognitively offloading even things like innovation and creativity, which has traditionally been a human domain. Any kind of breakthrough that we've experienced in any field so far has been a result of a very particular human experience. It includes productive struggle, it embodies intelligence. So therefore, if we think that we can offload this notion of creativity to a system that is completely different, we are delusional. And so therefore, what we need to do instead is we need to build systems that, as you said, serve as collaborators with humans, but also can enhance human intelligence and human creativity. So can we build an AI system that instead of spouting out some superficial ideas that we take for granted, instead, can we design a system that actually helps us optimize our own ability to be creative and innovative? And the only way that we're going to do that is have the human at the center of that design process, and because it's going to be bad for both AI and for humans if we go down this route. Because after all, as we've just said, the AI models as well as the data on which AI is trained comes from somewhere. Where does it come from? It comes from humans, right? So if humans are not producing the novel knowledge in the first place, what is future AI going to be trained on? So I think that actually to maintain our creative integrity as humans, we need to design AI systems that help us in that process so that AI itself becomes optimized in ways that we don't currently understand.
Waqas, thank you. I love the point that you made that greatness was born out of the human experience. And that's the reality. If you look at, throughout history, it's always been when we're bringing diverse perspectives together to create something new. And the more different those perspectives, the more data we have to draw upon to create that great experience. Olivia, you're working with AI for good. And when I hear that word AI for good, what I think of is how do we serve humanity better through AI? What does that mean from a policy perspective? And how are those policies going to be able to keep up and control AI, which is running at a really fast pace?
I mean, we have a lot of technological innovation that can address that, right? There's a reason why politicians don't want transparency in their deliberations. I mean, if AI can listen to our conversation, profile us, and then put us in a category, why can we not do the same with our politicians? I mean, we have technology that we could use towards building smaller language models that are more accurate, more explainable, that can contribute to a larger federated learning model that can give us access to better information and give us, I'm going to use one pedantic academic word, epistemic agency, ability to give us all the information we need so that we can make a rational choice that is in the benefit for us. And I think the problem with tech companies, and they've very much capitalized on this, is it is a vast field of knowledge that requires deep expertise in multiple areas that leave us outsourcing our agency and our sovereignty towards something that is vertically integrated and impossible to defeat in a monolithic way. So I believe we should look at nature as inspiration. every organism has a part in the larger ecosystem. We need smaller models that represent different diverse groups, techno-diversity, not just in culture, but intelligence and how we use that type of technology. And when you do that, then you're able to build a healthier ecosystem that relies on each other, which spreads the wealth and knowledge and checks and balance each other should one of us go astray and do not hold our integrity. Because when you extract from the larger ecosystem an organism without paying back to the ecosystem, as big tech has done, you become a virus. And that's what you have in your society. So if you're dependent on big tech technology from the ground up, from hardware all the way up to the cloud, to the infrastructure we're now building in the EU, then you have a problem. And I've seen this time and time over. I come from an indigenous society that's been post-colonialized by America, and now I'm living in a European context. And I'm seeing the very same thing that happened to my tiny nation happening to you through techno-colonialism, techno-fascism, and techno-oligarchs.
Take a deep breath, everyone.
Sorry, I'm really fun in AI parties, I promise.
Yeah, no, this is all fine. I want to just give you a sense of this new age that we're living in. And it all started in 2022 when ChatGPT was released. Okay, and I want to give you a sense of all the various platforms out there and how long it took them to reach 1 million users. Okay, Netflix, it took 49 months. Twitter, 24 months. Airbnb, 30 months. Facebook, 10 months. Instagram, 2.5 million. And November the 30th, when ChatGPT was released in 2022, in less than a week, there were 1 million users, okay? There are 200 million people using it daily today. And according to Sam Altman, there's 800 million people using ChatGPT. That's only one language learning model. There are several big players out there. Now, if you think of generative AI, which is what a language learning model is, okay, start to think of agentic AI. And I want to come to Gold here now. If you think of, generative AI does the thinking for you, okay? Agentic AI, the simple way of describing it is it's going to do the thinking for you, and it's going to act for you, okay? So think of all the driverless vehicles at the moment that are circling around roundabouts and forget to turn off, and then they meander off into a work zone and they crash, okay? So I'm being facetious here, of course, but the point I'm trying to make is that we're moving at such a fast pace. My concern is, we can put all the regulations we want in place, but we need to hold these people accountable. And I'm really interested to know from someone like Gold, who's working on the forefront of the technology, what's around the corner, Gold? Is life going to be extended? Is immortality around the corner? Tell us.
Yeah. So, is God real? Every one of you probably has something that pops into your head when I ask that as a question, right? And I hypothesize this not because I'm about to tell you whether the God's real, that's not a thing that I can do, but rather to make the implicit point that we all have opinions, right? And what generative AI is literally trained to do is to take all of your opinions, and anytime you ask a question like, is God real? It picks apart all of the answers and puts together a Frankenstein of what it thinks most people would like, and then you in specific what you want to hear. That's what Gen AI does. And that's a really bad thing to do when you consider that all of us lie to ourselves. Humans are really unique as a species for lying, and specifically for lying to ourselves and for lying in mass. And the problem with Gen AI is that it is literally made to tell you what you want to hear. And this is leading to things like suicides. You should not ask a generative model, which is designed to give you inspiration, designed to compensate for things like art or new ideas, because it's just slightly getting outside of your own head, to answer a concrete question. So while you can have an interesting hypothetical that comes up to like, is God real? If you want to ask it, hey, I'm building a bridge. How many sheets of wood do I need to not die in this ravine? Do not ask a Gen AI model this question. You need to ask an agentic AI model this question that has a real engineering process behind it to give a numerical, quantitative, calculated answer to a real question that is life or death. And the problem with these technologies is what happened in 2022 is people were like, oh my God, AI is real. I got news for you. I've been in AI for 15 years, but in what would now be considered agentic, it's been real for a long time and we've been using it for stuff. It's just, it wasn't accessible to people because we used coding interfaces, which are really boring. And the instant that people thought that they could query it with native language and get answers that sounded smart, they were like, oh man, this is a thing. But that's not where it happened, and that's not where the power is. So anytime that you're like, well, it's not really going to replace me, we can't really get these interesting results, we can't really get amazing results in healthcare or things that matter because I see hallucinations, because I see problems. Nothing interesting that's going to happen with AI is going to come from a Gen AI. It is a voice box. It is there to communicate with people who don't know how to speak computer, and it is there to tell you something. And almost all the problems that you see, like the silos of information, actually don't have anything to do with the fact that the model can't handle the complexity. It's because you can't. Sorry. You're asking a question where you want a simple answer, and it's trying to give you a simple answer to a complicated question, but it's not confused. It knows that 100 things are true at once, but that you only want to know one, because if it tells you 100, you're going to be like, that's not the answer I was looking for, right? So the answer to what's coming is yes, all of these things are coming. We could be living in a Black Mirror episode or in Star Trek in the next 10 years. And we get to decide which of those things is going to happen. And right now, we're on a Black Mirror course. This can be fixed. We can get on a Star Trek course. But I need you all to really understand that this will not come from large language models and that there is real power in truth. And that if you want anything good to happen, you need to go home today and figure out what keeps you alive and figure out what matters to you. And you need to figure out how to find those truths and make sure that you are surrounding yourself with data and technology and access to that, or you will be living in Black Mirror.
Well, thank you very much. I want to make some closing remarks before I hand it over to the floor for some questions. In the work that we do in our organisation, we often talk about survivorship bias. And what we mean by that is how often we make decisions on only what we can see rather than what we can't see. And there's so much missing data out there. Survivorship bias came about during World War II. There was this brilliant mathematician called Abraham Wald. He escaped Europe because of his heritage. He arrives in the United States of America. The US Defence Force snaps him up straight away. They take him to this warehouse full of all these bombers riddled with bullets. And they said to Abraham, can you let us know where we need to put armour on the planes? And he said, you're showing me the wrong planes. Can I see the planes that haven't come back? Of course, they couldn't because they were on enemy lines or on the bottom of the ocean or blown to smithereens. But he was able to work out through a process of elimination that the planes that weren't coming back were obviously not the ones that had the bullet holes in there. They were in different bullet holes. So he was able to, create new models and strengthen these planes. So that gave way to this survivorship bias. And I know through the work that we do, and we're constantly interrogating data. Are the data sets inclusive of humanity? And what we've worked out with our organisation through our data analytics model, just with 90% of the most selected responses, there are 700 trillion different combinations. I'm not too sure whether AI is ever going to be able to understand the complexity of human identity. Okay? So we're always going to need human intervention, and humans are going to always need to be in control. On that note, I want to hand it over to the floor we're going to take 3 questions. We'll listen to those questions, and then I'm going to ask the panelists to answer the questions. Thank you. Any questions?
I can add something while they're looking for questions. I think it's a bit dire. AI has been incredibly disruptive to our economy, our education, our politics. But with disruption comes opportunity. And maybe this is me coming from the startup world, so I'm a little bit more mentally agile, and I see opportunity, and I try to go for those kind of loopholes within a system that has so much inertia. And I think we take for granted that democracy, though grammatically a noun, should actually be a verb. And democracy as an action, as involvement, as proactive participation in this discussion needs to be done. And I'd like to point out that Denmark, in the EU presidency, though they have a lot of fancy words and buzzwords about data sovereignty, they are also pushing for chat control to surveil our entire population. And the biggest fall to democracy is not only surveillance, but as Gold put it out there, the agency is taking away the fractured nature of this technology to pin us against each other and to polarize us, as the main topic of this talk is about. So how do we fight in the democratic values of you when you have a technological tech stack that's actually built against you? So this chat control proposed by the Danish EU Parliament in their presidency is detrimental to your democracy because you cannot build resistance towards the very powers that are pushing you against each other because of the Ukrainian war, tapping into your dissonance that you're not supporting people literally dying from lethal autonomous weapons. We are living in that sci-fi dystopia. We're using AI against humanity already. But Europe has a chance. You have the money, you have the knowledge workers, and you have collective solidarity. We are looking to you for leadership. So step up and take in that role because we have a huge void that needs to be fixed right now. We need to repair that trust. And I'm American, so I'm coming to you not as a call of action, but a call of ethics.
Yeah, we have a question over here. Thank you very much for that. And I just want to remind everyone about one of the earlier slides. We've seen there's a strong correlation between the rise of social media and peace declining across the world. I have, my take is that I think AI is great. But if we race to adopt it too quickly, well, I think it could be quite detrimental to humanity. We have a question over here from...
Mario, my name is Mario Hatzdamianos. I sit with the ethics board of EIT, and the question is, we are turning countries into companies. So where is the differentiation between politics and technology when the prime ministers are treating their own countries as companies?
Ooh, I actually really want to say something about this because yes, sure, but what is the product though? Because right now, every country makes its primary income by taxing human labor. And I want to be crystal clear right now that any country that thinks that's their revenue model in 5 to 10 years will be bankrupt and will not be functional. Because in an era of AI, you cannot be discriminating against human labor when AI labor will already be cheaper. So while I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea for countries to recognize that they do need to operate on some principles like that, they need to really fundamentally change who is their customer and who is their product. Because their product is their national resources. Every country has physical geographic borders, and their job is to protect the resources inside and to provide in perpetuity for the citizens. And they need to stop treating their citizens like the product, and they need to start treating their citizens like their customers, and their actual resources need to be regenerative because those are the product. That's what they need to be supporting this kind of business industrialization around. And we can and should do that with AI. A lot of scientists have built some really good models. This is not a technology problem, and done correctly, this is a huge step towards peace and stability. And it is about that decolonialization in many ways that we talked about, because every country should be functionally independent. We should not be trading on what you need to live, but what you need to thrive. And that future is worth fighting for.
Thank you very much, Gold. We have about a minute left. We don't have any time to take any questions. We've got a QR code there, so if you want to scan the QR code, if you have any questions, please email us. There's a small survey there as well. And whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to hand over to my panelists and just hear like a 10-second thought, the final thought they would like to share with each of you, starting with Jean-Christophe.
10 seconds.
10-second thought.
Well, just to say that the tech giants need their customers around the world as much as the customer need the tech giants. So we should always keep this in mind, that there will be 2.5 billion people in Africa just in 20 years' time, and that we need to develop a spirit of resistance.
Thank you very much, Waqas. Let's hear from you.
The system relies upon dependency on AI models, dependencies on the technology. So the best thing that we can do as individuals is much of the activism we've spoken about here, but most importantly, develop your own mind and sovereignty.
Thank you. Olivia, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that. I think self-awareness is key. Cultivating your creativity and cultivating your human connections moving forward, because I think this will be fundamental in how we build a new future that is more human-centric and more democratic.
And 3 words from Gold.
3 words. I was just going to say quickly, I challenge you all to be micropreneurs. Stop thinking about being the next pop star or breadth. Think about depth. Solve the problem that matters to you and make that available to the people like you.
Please put your hands together. Thank you for our panelists. Darr-Hood, Jean-Christophe, Waqas, Ahmed, and Olivia Heslinga. Thank you very much.